Tenerife Airport disaster. 583 people dead, 1 misheard command, and just 36 seconds between routine and ruin. On March 27, 1977, at Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife, the world witnessed its deadliest aviation accident. 2 Boeing 747s, Pan Am Flight 1736 and KLM Flight 4805, found themselves on the same runway at the worst possible time. The day had already spiraled into chaos. A terrorist bombing at nearby Gran Canaria Airport forced inbound flights to reroute to Tenerife, clogging the small regional airfield. Taxiways jammed, parking overflowed, and tensions climbed as delays dragged on. Then came the fog, dense, disorienting, and fatal. Pan Am was taxiing cautiously through near-zero visibility. At the other end, KLM's captain misinterpreted a vague radio transmission as clearance for takeoff. He powered down the runway. Seconds later, the KLM jet smashed into the Pan Am aircraft at full throttle. The explosion lit up the fog like a flashbulb. Both planes disintegrated. Everyone aboard the KLM flight died. On the Pan Am side, just 61 people made it out alive. But the true horror wasn't just the fire or the fatalities. It was how easily it could have been avoided. Phrases like, "okay" and "we're ready" had left too much room for interpretation. Deadly ambiguity at 200 tons and 160 knots. After Tenerife, aviation rewrote the dictionary. "Cleared for takeoff" became the only acceptable phrase, and crew members were trained not just to follow orders, but to challenge them when something felt wrong. It wasn't just a crash, it was the wake-up call that proved clear communication can mean the difference between life and death. Next came another call, but this time, it wasn't a voice. It was the sound of metal tearing open mid-air over Japan. Japan Airlines Flight 123. 12 minutes. That's all it took for a hidden crack to sentence 520 people to death. On August 12, 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747 SR, lifted off from Tokyo's Haneda Airport, bound for Osaka. But just minutes into its flight, at cruising altitude, disaster tore through the sky. A rear pressure bulkhead, once damaged years earlier in a tail strike, suddenly gave way. The explosive decompression blew off the aircraft's entire tail section. With it went every hydraulic system on board. No rudder, no elevator, no way to steer. Now in a sky without control, the jumbo jet began an eerie, helpless spiral over the mountainous terrain of Gunma Prefecture. For 32 gut-wrenching minutes, the pilots tried everything. They used engine thrust, they fought gravity, they bought time. At 6:56 p.m., the aircraft slammed into Mount Takamagahara. Out of 524 souls, only 4 survived. All flight attendants, most of the crew, and nearly every passenger were gone. The final moments were horrifying, but the cause? Even more infuriating. The bulkhead had been improperly repaired 7 years earlier, using a single row of rivets instead of the 2 required. It was a silent flaw, waiting to erupt. Flight 123 remains the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history, and it forced the world to take aircraft maintenance more seriously than ever before. Because when a mistake is sealed inside metal, time doesn't forgive. It counts down. Next, that countdown would reach 0 at 22,000 feet over the Pacific, with a loud bang and a ripped open cargo door. United Airlines Flight 811. A loud bang at 22,000 feet. Then, screams, suction, and silence. On February 24, 1989, United Airlines Flight 811, a Boeing 747, had just departed Honolulu en route to New Zealand when a terrifying malfunction tore open the aircraft mid-air. Just 16 minutes into the flight, the forward cargo door failed catastrophically. The latch mechanism, designed with a fatal flaw, gave way under pressure. The door blew off. A gaping hole appeared in the fuselage. 9 passengers seated near the breach were instantly sucked out into the darkness. The decompression ripped through the cabin, peeled back flooring, and shredded systems buried beneath. In the chaos, the pilots wrestled control from the jaws of catastrophe. Against all odds, they turned the crippled plane around and landed safely back in Honolulu. 328 lives were saved. But the investigation uncovered a chilling truth. This wasn't a freak accident. The cargo door had shown signs of failure months earlier, on the ground. And the flaw? A known issue in the door's electrical latch design. One short circuit and it could open even if it looked locked. After Flight 811, Boeing redesigned cargo door mechanisms across the 747 fleet. Inspectors worldwide were ordered to examine every latch, every wire. It took 9 lives to fix a design buried beneath the floorboards. Next came a crash that would defy physics, because what happens when your plane loses all steering and you're still in the sky? United Airlines Flight 232. 3 engines, 0 control, and 44 minutes to save nearly 300 lives. On July 19, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, was en route from Denver to Chicago when catastrophe struck at 37,000 feet. The tail-mounted engine exploded. Shrapnel sliced through the aircraft, severing all 3 hydraulic systems. In an instant, the plane lost the ability to steer, climb, or descend. No controls, no manual backup, no precedent. But this crew didn't give up. Using only the throttle, adjusting power between the left and right engines, they began guiding the wounded aircraft towards Sioux City, Iowa. For 44 tense minutes, they coordinated one of the most daring attempts at controlled flight in history. When the plane landed, it veered violently, cartwheeled, and broke apart in a fireball. But of the 296 people on board, 185 survived. It was a nightmare, but also a miracle. The investigation revealed the root cause: a tiny crack in a titanium disc inside the engine, invisible to routine checks. That single flaw unraveled everything. The legacy? Stronger inspections, stricter material testing, and redundancy in flight controls so that no aircraft would ever again be rendered completely uncontrollable. Flight 232 became a case study in teamwork under pressure, a lesson still taught to pilots around the world. Because when all systems fail, what's left is human resolve. And next, that resolve would be tested again, this time on a clear day, just seconds before landing in San Francisco. Asiana Airlines Flight 214. Clear skies, perfect visibility, and a plane that came in far too low. On July 6, 2013, Asiana Airlines Flight 214, a Boeing 777, was on final approach to San Francisco International Airport after a long haul from Seoul. Everything seemed routine. Weather was ideal. But in the cockpit, something was off. Just 7 seconds before touchdown, the aircraft was flying too slow and too low. The auto throttle, which normally regulates airspeed, had been disengaged, and the pilots didn't notice. They were manually flying a visual approach but failed to monitor critical descent indicators. At the last moment, the crew tried to abort the landing, but it was already too late. The 777 slammed into the seawall just short of the runway. The tail snapped off. The fuselage crashed down and spun violently. Out of 307 people on board, 3 passengers died. More than 180 others were injured, some critically. 2 of the fatalities were ejected from the aircraft, likely because they weren't wearing seatbelts. It was the first fatal crash of a Boeing 777, and it rattled the aviation world. The cause? Human error. In an age of automation, basic flying skills had slipped. The pilots had relied too heavily on systems, and in a moment of manual flight, it cost lives. The crash sparked a global rethink. Training programs were revised to reinforce hands-on flying, especially during visual landings. Cockpit communication, role clarity, and confidence under pressure were put back in focus. Because when software goes silent, a pilot's awareness must speak louder. Next comes a disaster where no one ever saw it coming, because from the ground, someone was aiming for the sky. Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. A routine flight at 33,000 feet. Then, an explosion, silence, and sunflower fields on fire. On July 17, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, cruising peacefully above eastern Ukraine. There was no warning, no distress call. Then the aircraft vanished from radar. Moments later, flaming wreckage rained down across a village called Rabov. All 298 people on board were dead. The investigation would reveal something chilling. MH17 had been shot out of the sky by a surface-to-air missile, a Russian-made BUK system, launched from separatist-controlled territory during the conflict in Ukraine. The missile struck the cockpit. The flight crew was killed instantly. The plane broke apart mid-air. This wasn't an accident. It was an act of war, and it changed aviation forever. For decades, the assumption had been simple. If a plane flies high enough, it's safe from conflict below. MH17 shattered that belief. In the months that followed, airlines rerouted flights around conflict zones. Safety was no longer just about maintenance and mechanics. It was about geopolitics. Now, international aviation authorities actively track war zones. Flight paths are planned not just for fuel efficiency, but for survival. Because MH17 didn't just fall from the sky, it was brought down by the world below. Next, A new kind of enemy would emerge, not from a battlefield but from inside the plane itself, coded in software, hidden from pilots. Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302. Two crashes, one deadly flaw, and a software system no one told the pilots about. On October 28, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8, took off from Jakarta. Within just 2 minutes, the nose began to pitch down aggressively. The pilots fought back. Over and over, they corrected. And over, the plane resisted. For 11 agonizing minutes, they battled the controls. And then, the aircraft plunged into the Java Sea. All 189 people on board were lost. Just 5 months later, it happened again. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 departed Addis Ababa. Within seconds, the same terrifying pattern began. The nose dipped, the crew fought back, and the system pushed harder. 6 minutes later, it crashed into the ground at over 500 miles per hour. Another 157 lives gone. The culprit? A piece of software. It was called MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, added by Boeing to compensate for the MAX 8's tendency to pitch upward due to its larger engines. But MCAS relied on a single sensor, and if that sensor failed, the system would repeatedly push the nose down, regardless of pilot input. Worse still, pilots weren't trained on it. Boeing hadn't even mentioned MCAS in the flight manuals. The aftermath was seismic. The 737 MAX was grounded worldwide for nearly 2 years. Investigations uncovered a pattern of cost-cutting, missed warnings, and regulatory blind spots. Boeing lost billions. Executives faced Congress. The FAA overhauled certification procedures. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a failure of trust, oversight, and transparency. The skies eventually reopened to the MAX, but not before aviation was forced to ask, what happens when the real danger isn't mechanical, but digital? Because in the modern age, even invisible errors can take hundreds of lives. Conclusion. From Tenerife's runway miscommunication to software-triggered nosedives over Indonesia and Ethiopia, every tragedy in this timeline serves as a brutal checkpoint in the evolution of aviation safety. Each crash wasn't just a loss, it was a lesson carved into history with the lives of passengers and crew. Regulations changed, systems improved, and the world kept flying, hopefully smarter than before. These stories remind us that progress is often paid for in heartbreak. But if aviation continues to listen to its failures, then every one of these disasters can stand for something more than just sorrow. They become the reason tomorrow's flight lands safely. Which Boeing crash shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you want a part 2, we've got more history to unfold. And hey, if this story moved you or taught you something new, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more gripping aviation stories. Your support helps us bring more forgotten truths to light.